Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest. This morning we've got two jobs. Welcome back to the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest. This morning we've got two jobs. Both are slight emergencies, but not super critical emergencies. So we were just going to do one, but we just got this second emergency call out. We're going to actually do first right now. This gentleman who's new to the area, only speaks Spanish, just called me. So I didn't really understand exactly what he was talking about because he doesn't know a lot of the terms for vehicles. But basically, he just got a new car and the power steering started making a lot of noise. He said there's a lot of oil on the ground underneath it, so it might have a busted line or something like that. And so we're going to go over there and check it out and see if we can't get it fixed for him or figure it out. And, you know, whether he wants to do it or have a buddy do it, at least get him the diagnosis. So we'll head over there real quick in the small truck, and then we've got to run to the parts store and pick up a gasket and some bolts for a job later this afternoon. Well, actually just after this morning, because it's going to be super hot today. The high's like 99. So the sooner the better we get it done. It's not super blazing hot, but it is going to be an intake manifold gasket on a 1998 Chevy Astro van. So all right, so here we are in the little truck. We're going to go to this first diagnosis real quick about this guy's truck. Probably just a power steering leak from what it sounds like, but again, could be pretty much anything. We'll go check it out for him, and we'll pick up some parts from the parts store, and then we'll be on our way up there to do that intake manifold gasket. So we'll get over there and check this guy's truck out, see what's going on. All right, so I just got back from that guy's. It was just a Honda Odyssey. It wasn't even a truck. But basically, yeah, he just didn't know what to explain. What happens is he had the temporary registration for his vehicle. It has a check engine light, and that was his main concern, is he needs to register his vehicle. As well as this morning, it started making a lot of noise in the power steering, which I guess is why he called us this morning. But his temporary registration expired on Saturday anyways. So I guess he just needs to get it done. Basically, he has a lot of codes, mostly misfires, and one code for his rocker arm control valve, which on those Hondas is the variable valve timing solenoid. There's a lot of oil leaking out from around that, as well as a code for the solenoid being stuck on/off. So whatever that means, it's probably going to end up being replaced. And then his power steering fluid, it doesn't have a major leak. In fact, I couldn't really pinpoint the leak, but the boots on his rack and pinion, well, specifically the outer tie rod boots, were disconnected. But again, there wasn't a lot of fluid around there, and obviously those boots are just to keep grime out and not keep fluid in. So I'm assuming there's probably something going on with the rack and pinion, but I didn't get all the way under there to look at it. There was one little seal and O-ring on the power steering pump that could probably be replaced. They thought they were just going to have to replace the whole power steering pump, so luckily I talked to him about it. It probably doesn't need to be replaced since it was working fine before and it just started making noise now that the fluid's completely low. It just needs more fluid, most likely. That you running it without fluid can damage the pumps anyways, but they're just going to top it off with fluid. It'll probably be fine since they didn't drive on it like that. As well as that little O-ring we'll probably plan on replacing when we're under there. Well, next time we go there and start digging further into it to replace that solenoid, I'm going to check for another leak as well down on the rack and pinion, see what might be leaking that power steering fluid, because the leak around that O-ring doesn't seem significant enough to leak that much fluid, but there's definitely a lot of oil around it. A lot relative, there's oil around it, it's not a ton. So that was a good diagnosis. We got him. We're going to go ahead now. I didn't get any footage either because him and his friend were out there watching, and so I didn't want to make him feel uncomfortable. But, you know, simple as that. We got it figured out. We're going to go up here now and do this intake manifold gasket. So it should be pretty straightforward. A lot of cool little footage tinkering around underneath the firewall of that Astro van. So I'm a little excited for this job. It should be fun. I like doing intake manifold gaskets for some reason. So here we go. '98 Chevy Astro van. So similar to like those cargo vans and stuff where the engine's just underneath the firewall, hard to get to, but on this Astro van at least there's a little bit of space on those engines, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. But this person didn't feel comfortable enough doing it. We went and diagnosed it the other day, which they had it diagnosed by a friend who's like a, you know, just a hobby mechanic. They overheated it, so the serpentine belt came off and the water pump stopped working and it overheated, and his wife drove it for, I think I wanted to say it was like 10 miles or something, overheating because she didn't know what to do, and then it developed a leak. So I thought, man, that might be head gaskets. It might have done some damage. Luckily I found out it didn't drain out all its coolant, so at least it had some water in the block, and it sounds like, well, it looks like it's just leaking from the top of that intake manifold. So not the head gaskets. I might do a block test when we get over there, or we may just start with that. So all right, we just got here. So far, not too hot. There's a nice big shade tree in front of this vehicle, so hopefully it stays pretty cool. But if you want to see something embarrassing on my part, this is just how messed up this truck gets after, you know, last week was a pretty long week. I didn't even make much video after I did that. My last video, which was a day in the life of a mobile mechanic, I've just kind of not taken a break from making videos, but just, well, I guess technically, yeah, I haven't made a few videos, but we're here. We'll get this one made. This one's probably more interesting. Last week was just a lot of repetitive stuff. So we'll get this intake manifold going. We got the gasket here, and we've got new bolts for it because they get pretty rusted out. So yeah, we'll get to it. All right, so here's the first look at it. I'm probably going to do most from the inside, seeing as how it's tucked up that way. But first things first, I'm going to drain this coolant and try and preserve the nice fresh oil they have in there, but I told them an oil change may be inevitable. So we'll get started. Here's a look at it up front. I guess I'm going to be putting everything back together for them as well, which I don't care too much. I'd have had to, well, I guess I wouldn't have had to take all this apart, but we'll see. We'll get everything going. All right, trying to get a nice controlled drip on that antifreeze here, just barely opening that hose. Try and let it drain out slow, since I don't need to worry about it being completely empty for a few minutes. Since all that's gonna happen is when I pop the seal on that intake manifold, if there is coolant in there, it'll run into that valley on top of the engine. So we're good now. We've got that undone. We'll disconnect in a minute this front coolant hose, and then just a couple of the cables and stuff up here, but I'm gonna go ahead and start digging into it from behind there, and then we'll move up front again before we actually need to remove everything. So here we go, fun one. All right, so it's been about 30 minutes and I've got pretty much everything cleared off. I'm getting off these fuel lines now. I'm just gonna leave these intact up here because I don't like to mess with this specific fuel system, those little spider injectors or whatever they call them, which I'm assuming it has because it looks exactly like the last one I did that did have them. So it may be different, but I don't see any injectors out here on the outside, so it's probably just those spider injectors. I've got that big connector wrapped up in a glove because I don't want to get any dirt in that. I've got this little hole stuffed with just a little rubber glove to keep debris out of there, that distributor hole. But other than that, everything's pretty much disconnected at this point. I might just take this whole sensor off there. I've got to do the throttle cables and then undo the bolts. It's pretty much ready to come out. But again, we've got new bolts for it. They look like they're probably in pretty decent shape, but I'll go ahead and replace them regardless. So nice clean engine. Well, relatively speaking, I've seen a lot dirtier. So 30 minutes in, just updating you because we're probably pretty close to getting this all out of the way. Okay, so here's those intake manifold bolts on that side. You can see this one right here is just really wet, so obviously leaking coolant around that intake manifold gasket on this side. So you can see they do get pretty rusty. These ones I could probably reuse, but I've already got the new ones and there's no sense in doing that. So I'm gonna put the new ones in. These are trash. Well, I may reuse them on something down the road of my own, but customers got new ones, so that's about it. I've got to just pull those front ones off and that throttle cable as well still, but kind of just looking back here, but you can definitely see the coolant around just that bolt right there. So we're going to go ahead. I mean, obviously we're already here, but pull this out in just a second and get this all cleaned up, and that should take care of it. All right, so we've got everything loose, including the 𝐒𝐸𝐿 hose, the coolant hose on the front, and we did have to loosen that bracket that the power steering and AC compressor sit on to move it forward, because it just hangs over the front bolt here, if you can see that up there. So we just had to slide it forward 1/2 inch. We didn't have to take the very bottom bolt off of off the bottom corner side off that bracket. But anyways, now we're going to pry this. The one thing you want to be careful of is just putting your pry bar in here. Don't pry against the plastic. Yeah, so we're just gonna go ahead and pry this up and get this gasket replaced, but everything's ready to come out, so here we go. Funny story, one time I went to the junkyard to get an intake manifold, you know, the lower intake. Might have been the same engine, I don't remember. No, I think it was on a Ford. And I got there, I was definitely on a Ford, because the little coolant line connector on the front rusts out, and there's no replacement. It's part of the lower intake. And so I went there and I was like, well, I'll just get a junkyard part, because the person wanted a junkyard part specifically, this old veteran guy. And so I went there, and when I looked at the intake manifold in the truck I was going to get it out of, it was the exact same one, and it looked brand new. I was like, whoa, no way, it looks brand new. So I'm like, well, I'll get this one because it looks new. And I mean, it definitely was. Everything around it was old, greasy, and rusty, and that was just nice new aluminum. And so, you know, 30 minutes later I pull the intake manifold, and when I do, there's an old red, you know, the red shop rags in here, just obliterated. So obviously it had just been replaced. Whoever replaced it left their rag inside the valley right here, and it obviously blew the engine, probably had no oil pressure, got clogged up the oil system, and blew the engine. But I don't know what happened, why they never took it back apart. Maybe somebody did it themselves, but it was definitely destroyed by that red rag left in there. So don't ever forget to take your rags out. All right, so here's our clean intake manifold here. Then if we come in here, we've got our clean surface to on the heads and the block to mount that to. Just a little bit of debris fell in there. I got most of it cleaned up, but pretty good considering what the job is. And anyways, I'll have the customer run it for a few minutes and then do an oil change to kind of flush everything out. So The hardest part now is going to be getting these valley ridges full of silicone RTV and then setting that intake down straight down on it. It likes to go down, you know, at an angle, push it around, so you got to really get it just straight down on there and then drop it. So the only other thing is just taking this coolant hose off the front. I may have put a hole in it, prying on it. It just was real stuck on there, so I'm going to go ahead and replace this just in case I did put a hole in there with my pliers. I couldn't tell, but it was pretty close. So I'll pull the rest of that hose off. I'm going to get the replacement for that. And but that can go on, you know, after the intake. It's harder to get off the way they have these hose clamps on there, but you know, you can put them back on once you have the intake in, and it's not as big of a deal because you can put those hose clamps on in whatever direction you want. So we'll go ahead and get this siliconed up and put back together. All right, that went on pretty straight, so I didn't get any of that silicone squished off to one side or the other. It went down right straight on there, so that was awesome because it doesn't always happen that way. So cool, but heavy, but in there. Here we go, back together. We got our new bolts. Again, when you're doing, I think I've said this before, but this is just the one thing that'll get me every time. Well, not really anymore. When you're putting bolts in something and there's multiples of them, always get them all started before you tighten one down, because man, that was like my arch nemesis for a long time. I would always start putting one in, I'm like, yeah, it's going, and I'd tighten it down, and then I couldn't get any of the other ones in. So just get them all started first. Nice new bolts. Okay, just giving everything the look over, but that should be the last of everything all together now. There's nothing else out of place. I'm just making sure everything's tightened down, because you know, you'll lay awake at night just sitting there thinking, and then all of a sudden a random nut will pop into your head that you never tightened down. So then you got to go fix it. So I like to just make sure everything's done while I'm still here, rather than having to come back. But we are going to have to get that hose. I don't remember if I talked about that hose. I think I did, but you know, that hose up front, that was stuck real hard. So then I'm pretty sure I got a little hole in it right here, and then it wouldn't come off on the bottom since I already was going to replace it, because I think I put a hole in it. I just went ahead and cut it off. So probably just easier, but I wished I wouldn't have put that little hole in there. I wouldn't have had to cut it off, because if I could have just got this off, this was connected to the intake manifold, so I could have just left it there. But since I thought I put a hole in it, I just took the whole thing off to replace. So anyways, I think that's it. I think all of our connectors, oh, there we go, said the magic word. There was one on the back of the AC compressor here that I've still got to plug in. That's in. And there's this bolt on the back of that AC compressor I need to tighten down as well. Okay, everything's in place the way I found it, except for that one hose. I'm not going to put this back on yet, because I'm going to go ahead and run and grab that hose, and I'll just leave most of my tools up here, and I'll come up here afterwards, put the rest of this together, and then I'll just grab my tools in my little truck. So that's it for now. We'll go grab this hose, head back home, and then I'll bring the little truck up here to grab the rest of the tools and finish this up, since no sense in taking the big truck across town twice just to put this hose back on and this shroud around the radiator. So we'll check back in when we get that hose. But it's a little hot. All right, back up here, we got the little truck this time. You can see it peeking around back there. All we've got to do is, well, all we theoretically would have had to do is put this hose back on, but we're going to put all this stuff back on as well: the alternator, the fan shroud, and the intake hose, pipe, tube, whatever you want to call it. So we'll go ahead, get this hose on. All right, so here we are. We just got everything in place. These last two connectors, this hose here with the mass airflow sensor on it, air cleaner, everything, fan shroud, all the bolts are here and accounted for. We'll go ahead and hook up this battery and it'll be good to go. So this is the Roadside Rescue YouTube channel. I'm Ernest. If you like the video, consider subscribing. We've been getting a lot more viewers who are subscribers, so that's awesome. We got a huge giveaway coming away, a huge giveaway coming up. We got a huge giveaway coming up. I'll have more of that in a video here to come. This is a job well done. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.